Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Engaging the In-Between, Combating the Middle Grade Reading Crisis, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
Welcome to Engaging the In-Between, Combating the Middle Grade Reading Crisis. Y'all know we've been going through it. So we're gonna give you some tools to deal with that today. But before we get into this, we have to do the very exciting work of housekeeping. Okay, so if you haven't downloaded the app, download the app. This is not a paid advertisement. This is the real deal. Download the app. You can get all the slides from this presentation and every presentation on there. Also, there is a competition for which session gets the most survey responses. You all don't know me well yet, but you will by the time this is over. And what you will learn about me is I am very competitive. And so fill out the survey, please.
Or she'll find you.
And you'll see me coming with this bright sweater, okay? All right. So recordings for this are also going to be available on BookWeb. So important detail, if you have a question once this is over, we are going to ask that you wait for the mic to get to you. We're recording this. Obviously, we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard, both, theoretically and literally. And for the purposes of this, because it is being recorded and because I don't want to be interrupted, obviously, please silence your cell phones and devices. That's what we got for you. We are going to do a Q&A at the end, so hold your questions until then. In the meantime, antitrust guidelines. Booksellers are encouraged to share ideas and support during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits them from discussing the following: price and pricing policies, boycotts, dividing up the market. For more information, see ABA's full antitrust guidelines on BookWeb. Thank you. All right, so you all know we are struggling to engage middle grade readers. We're struggling to engage all readers of a certain age, actually. We're going to walk through how we got here, but less important than the how of why we're here is how we move forward from here. How do we recapture those readers? How do we arrange our stores in a way that activates those readerships again? All right. Holly's going to hit us with the agenda real quick.
All right. Well, let's see.
Can you see from over there?
I can't really.
You know what? And that's okay because
you go ahead with the agenda.
Because perfect. They gave me a handout. All right. So the agenda. We're about to right after this agenda because I got you. Heard. How could they put us over here in the dark? I've been asking that question this whole time. Okay.
Your sweater is gonna like.
And that's what they told me. They were banking on that. Welcome to my hour-long stand-up routine. Okay, so, God. All right, the agenda. We're going to identify the possible causes for disengagement. So we want to figure out how we got here, but we're also going to figure out the areas in our stores that are really working. We're going to figure out how we can use those details to better arrange our buying and our merchandising. And we're going to look at actual data that gives us trends for where the industry is heading. And most importantly, we're going to create an action plan for increased engagement. But before we get there, hi, I'm Leah Johnson. Thank you so much. I am the owner of Loudmouth Books, a banned bookstore in Indianapolis, Indiana. But in addition to that, hopefully some of you have my books on your shelves because I write books for children and young adults. Thank you.
I'm Bren Lopez from Children's Book World, which is a queer managed, BIPOC managed, Indigenous managed, Latinidad managed, and that is all me.
Right. Just you.
And I've been a bookseller for 36 years.
I'm Paul Swiden, the owner and the operator of the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton, Mass.
And I'm Holly Weinkoff. I'm the owner of Red Balloon Bookshop in St. Paul, Minnesota, where we just celebrated 40 years. And also, I want to say how much it fills up my heart to see a room full of people interested and caring about kids reading. So thank you all for being here during Winter Institute. I mean, I expect this at Children's Institute, but this is great. So thank you all.
All right. You know what? Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you. If there's cameras in the room, we have to have the lighting right. Okay, perfect. So there's graphics. It's moving. Okay. So we're going to talk first about the societal impact, how screen time and COVID-19 has sort of affected the way our readers are approaching books and stories. Let's see.
Yeah. So, so the first step is acknowledging that there's this problem, right? And was anybody at this session yesterday, the Circana session? So you heard the info, the data that of all the areas, middle grade kids fiction is significantly down. So it's good to we don't want to dwell on this, but to just take a minute to think about what are those factors. Right now there's so many things competing for our kids' time. New tech, screen time. We all know COVID was a challenge. Although it's important to acknowledge that the downslide was happening before then. Certainly the pandemic didn't help. The limited access to books. As I said, other things are competing with kids' interests. Thinking about, do the kids have adults in their lives who are engaged with reading? And so just thinking about all of those factors and what is our role with any of those.
Right, societal impacts, yeah. And for those of you who are interested, I know some of y'all are big data folks. We have all the slides, all the numbers available. Where? Yeah. You know it. So if you want to refer back to it.
Okay, so again, we're not going to delve too much into what you're seeing here on the screen, but you can see clearly that, as time has gone by, kids are reading every day less and less. I see this at my house. Every time I have to ground my daughter from screens, all of a sudden she reads more books. This happened last week during vacation week, and she read 4 books. And I said, why do we ever let her have the screens? But it's an ongoing challenge for us all, especially now that your screens can be so portable.
So I'm looking at it from a different perspective slightly. I think that the problem is us. I think the problem is the teachers. I think the problem is the librarians. I think it's because we're entrenched in an idea about what middle grade reading actually is. Mm-hmm. And we have not allowed kids to actually have the joy of reading that we allow ourselves. We give ourselves that gift, but we don't give it to them. So you go into a bookstore, parent walks up and points at the one child and says, "That's my reader." Of course, they read Harry Potter or whatever else they read on the shelves. They're not my reader because they read graphic novels or they read nonfiction books about something else. But those readers are actually the stronger readers in the long run because they understand context. They understand a deeper level of reading than they might if they're just starting. And they become great readers. When the door opens for them, it may not be when you're 8 like some of us did. It may be when you're 13 or 14. But because you've been reading with love and passion. So as we get into it, we talk about it. It's really about how can we rethink, does middle grade reading have to actually be in middle grade fiction? I've been moving chapter books with illustrations into graphic novel. It is in my graphic novel section so that when they have finished with Dogman or whatever else they're reading a graphic novel, they actually have those. They're not going to go find those books somewhere else, but if they're right there next to them, that's an option.
So to those points, as you look at this graph, you all can see that as early as we were able to collect this data, it has dropped significantly pretty much every year since. So we know that young people are not reading for fun in the ways they have in previous decades, previous generations. And we can point to any number of confounding factors for why that is the case. But the priority at this point is to stop that trend where it is and figure out how we can re-engage that readership. One of the ways we're thinking about is making sure that young people have access to stories that engage them where they are. And part of that work is making sure that they have stories that reflect their lived experiences. So most of you remember being in school and being told that there is a difference between high art and low art. There's a difference between what counts as real literature and what does not. Obviously, I write, not obvious to some of you, I'm Black and queer and also a woman. And so because I write books about Black queer girls from middle of nowhere, Indiana, many times those stories have been told that they are not high art, that they are not worthy of being read as actual literature. But we know that when we give students graphic novels that have storylines that are more pertinent to their lived experiences, when we give them books that maybe are not necessarily at the reading level they're supposed to be at, but at a different reading level, then we give them scaffolding that gives them access to the actual reading we want them to be doing.
And I think in addition to that, just going back to the keynote yesterday and the question that Ocean kept repeating, what do you like to read? Mm-hmm. And I think we're also good at that for the kids who come into our stores. What do you like to read and engaging them there?
So more data, we're going to fast forward through some of this, but what you'll see is that books for children are largely about animals. There are more books about dogs than there are about people of color in many communities. There are more than there are about queer people. And so, again, we posit that if you hand children stories that give them mirrors that reflect their experiences back to them, or windows, shout out to Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, windows that give them access to narratives or lives that are unlike their own, it will actually engage them more than the books that we are being told are high art. Oh, Jen did a great job putting the data on these slides, honey. I'm fast forwarding through all of it, but it's good, I promise. Okay. So we're also examining areas of sales growth in literature and other media. So here's what we see in adult readers.
Do you want me to read that?
We would love that.
Okay. Shifts in adult reading habits. In 2021, 17% of surveyed adults responded that they read 0 books that year. At the same time, 40% adults said they read 1 to 5 books in 2021. If I could just speak to that.
Brent, I would love that.
Okay, thank you.
We're working on a podcast, obviously. We're testing out something in this
Lee and I were on the National Book Awards Committee. If you love those books that were chosen this last year, we toast them. So we're very proud of all the work that we put into it. So I am a big one on having adults model the act of reading for young people. So there's 2 things that we're doing in our store that are new, that are exciting. One is, and I'm not going to get the right award. Somebody can yell it out to me. The award that the librarians do for adult books for teens. Alex, thank you. So we're doing a display that is focused on middle grade fiction every adult should read. And we all know those books, right? Because middle grade fiction is as close as you get to adult literary fiction. And so we're doing that display, but then we're also having parent-child book clubs going on, starting and then going through the summer, where we're going to pick books. It's not going to be just like one whole book. The parent-child can pick from a selection of books, and then we're going to have meetings where they can come in and talk about it together to the whole group and talk about it so that they're actually reading the book, not as a read aloud, but actually reading it individually. So getting parents to start modeling the act of reading as a pleasure, and specifically middle grade fiction.
Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? I have your name written down as though you did, so maybe.
No,
okay. Love that. Love that.
But I will say the good news that came out of yesterday's presentation too was that with the spike in romance books that, I think we are starting to see more adults being pulled back into reading. So just as they're reading for pleasure, if we can help the understanding that kids need to read for pleasure too, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So as we think about, first of all, if you can get an adult in a child's life to read a book, there's a high likelihood that you can get the child to read a book as well. And so as we look at how we can engage younger readers, we should also look at the trends that adults are engaging with currently. This is shout out to Circana for these numbers, but we know that in 2023 and 2024, adults were pointing towards books that were engaging they want to feel the fantasy. They want to engage with things that give them the chance to disappear into other worlds, other lives, etc. And so we can also intuit that children are engaging more with fantasy as well. And so it's no surprise that is a hot ticket item in our stores with the young readers in our lives. But it is something that we can point to as an actual, not just anecdotal, but we know it's happening.
One other thing I would add too, as we think about the adult-kid connection, is, and I talk about this a lot with the caregivers at our store. I mean, we think about reading aloud with our young kids, but the joy of reading aloud as kids get older and even into middle school. The family read aloud, or identifying those books.
Yeah, we've had a big thing where, because we have fantasy is not so big in our store for adults or kids, but mysteries and thrillers are huge, and so we put a lot of our classic thrillers in, and our YA thrillers mixed in with everything else, even the little kids stuff. It's all in one section, and we have parents and kids now going and reading the Agatha Christie books together because they read them when they were younger, and they want to have that, we're going to read Murder on the Orient Express and sort of go back and forth. And that's a really good example of the type of title that you can do that with. You already have a connection somewhere about it, and it's fun reading, and the kids really get it. The reason why kids reread graphic novels and reread middle grade over and over again is because they want to talk about it with somebody, and they have no one to engage with about the book, so they go back into the book. Right. And I try to tell this to parents all the time. When they go to bed and the book is sitting on the side, pick up the book and go take it to your room and read it so you can talk to them about what's inside the book. They want to talk to you about the book.
And, as we're talking about the things that are working in adult that maybe have some trickle down effect into middle grade, YA, even elementary school, younger readers, we should also acknowledge the fact that, maybe Sarah J. Maas is the thing that gets them in the door. But once they're in the store, you already got them. All we had to do was get them in that door and not on Amazon, so an algorithm can recommend the same book to them 10 different times in 15 different fonts, right? So once you get in there, find a way to pivot, not only to sell the grown person something different, but to figure out how we can bridge that gap for the both of them. Hey, this is a thing that we know you're interested in, but here's another thing that the young person that's with you might be able to, engage in conversation with you about. So some middle grade genre trends that are very clear that you all are seeing in your stores probably that we can talk about here. What's working in our stores?
So, the Wild Robot was a no-brainer last year. We couldn't keep it in. We do a lot of book fairs at schools, and usually schools get very snippety with us when we bring backlist. The number one complaint about other providers' book fairs is that we already saw that book. Everybody in the school already saw that book. We want the new books. But Wild Robot was obviously a gigantic exception with the movie coming out. So that was huge for us last year.
Something we saw in our presentation, I wasn't on this panel. Something we saw in the presentation yesterday about how licensed properties have the ability to be leveraged into engaging more readers is thinking about how if a movie is coming out in the next 6 months, the next 8 months, 12 months, that is going to have a huge fandom, find ways to bring that licensed property into the store. If they're interested in adventure stories, they're interested in dragons. Okay, well, we have this. This is not a dragon story. You like Little Mermaid, we have the novelization here. But if you like this, then you will also like this. So if X, then Y. I'm bad at math, but I feel like that's a formula.
So because of where we're located in Los Angeles, we get a lot of the publicists for these films actually calling us to be able to do draw raffles for special things that they actually do. And I was thinking about it because I had like 3 of them going on. What if we could get the studios to actually fund this sort of thing across the board through an organization like the ABA, so that they were promoting it when it was a book-related topic, but through all of our stores across the country. And that could be really, really exciting, because we could get kids into our stores because they were excited about them. So I'm still at the beginning stages of thinking about it, but yeah.
Right.
Appropriate reaction, yes. Also, as we're thinking about divesting from this idea of high art and low art, there are some folks in here, I know, we're going to talk about this towards the end, but I know that a lot of you are not coming from children's specific bookstores. You're coming from general interest bookstores that have children's sections. That's great. We love that. Don't think about Wicked as this thing that's like, I'm so tired of Wicked. Blah. I don't care what you're tired about. I don't care what you're tired of. The kids want witches, so give the kids witches.
Yeah.
But that's not a middle grade book. I wouldn't.
No, it's not. No. I'm not.
Don't give Wicked to any middle graders.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on in that book. But I'm saying again,
but there are plenty of middle grade books with witches.
Yes.
That we can use Wicked as a comp for X, Y, and Z thing that's appropriate for kids.
Yes.
Right. And to Leah, what Leah was saying earlier about, engaging with the properties, I said Wild Robot was popular for us, but we knew it was going to be popular. And so the movie came out in September. In June, we put a giant shelf talker up in the store that said, hey, the movie's coming. Did you read the books yet? And so that's worth thinking through. I already made a list of all the books that are going to be movies this year. A lot of them are adult books, but there's definitely kids books that are coming, or at the very least kid adjacent. Obviously, the biggest one is they're doing another How to Train Your Dragon. So there's always a great time. And believe it or not, there's a lot of books in that series. It's not just the original book. And there's going to be another Bad Guys movie. There's Paddington Peru's already out. Obviously, Dogman is already out. There are ways to engage with people. And even if they're not picking up those specific books, if that was something that got them in the door, then now they're in the door and now you can sell them something.
I want to say something real quick about an area of growth that we have had. I have a bookseller who has actually been building lists and incredible middle grade pages and picture book pages on Libros. On our Libros page. And she builds them and changes them out every single month and gets new ones. They've skyrocketed. The kids who are actually getting middle grade on audiobook. And now through Bookshop, we actually have the opportunity to be able to do the same thing, making these lists on our individual Bookshop pages for ebooks, because then you're actually meeting the kids. You're trying to get them from their phones into the store. But what if you could get the store to their phones? So if we read ebooks, because trust me, I read digital. That's what I do. If we do them, well, then why can't they? I want them to have a physical book. I need them to have a physical book. Well, for the ease of it, for fun, they might read it while they're traveling to school or on the bus or wherever it may be.
Or like you said, listen to an
audiobook. That may be the way that they actually, because they may have problems with reading.
And to the point earlier about there's, decline in reading from COVID. One of the things the English teachers in my kids' school district have encouraged us to do is get kids the audiobook and the physical book and have them listen to it and trail along with their finger. And that is going to help. It definitely helped my kids, but that's going to help their comprehension. And, obviously it's, whether it's Libro or you get it from the library, obviously it's hard for families to buy the same book twice. But that is definitely something that works and you can employ and in the long run is going to help create better readers.
And that's also passive money for you.
Right.
That's an important factor.
Engage the resources that you have at your disposal. We have Bookshop at our disposal. We have Libro.fm at our disposal. Also, shout out to Libro FM. I email them every week about one thing or another. Hey, I need more bookmarks. Hey, I don't understand how to use a QR code. Hey, and they're always on top of it. So, like no antitrust or whatever. I don't know how this works, but like people are there who are trying to like give you access to resources so that we can make this work easier for booksellers. So we've kind of started diving into this a little bit, but we want to talk a little bit more about frontlist buying and merchandising that we think can help activate young readerships in your stores. Here's what's working in our stores. This is not a database list. This is a purely anecdotal list, but you will see that there are huge properties that do really well everywhere. Jumping to Taylor Swift first and foremost, Taylor Swift books have a huge uptick in all book sales, account for a huge uptick in all book sales when there's a new book about Taylor Swift that comes out. We know that the excitement that came out when Taylor Swift announced that she was going to release her own book, which whatever. But the point is, we know that Taylor Swift works. So again, whatever our personal feelings about an artist or a property or a IP, whatever is, we know that the young people like it. So,
yeah. And if that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it didn't make it onto the slide. If you know me, I'm big into sports. I'm literally wearing a jersey right now. The Caitlin Clark books are coming.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the Angel Reese books will also be coming.
Right. Get into it.
We just saw that Dawn Staley has got a memoir coming out. But this is something you can engage kids on. And they don't necessarily have to buy the Caitlin Clark book, but a lot of publishers, Lerner and Capstone specifically, have kind of aped the Who Would Win series and are doing it with athletes now, which is real easy sells. Yeah. Capstone and Lerner have both been doing more Lerner than Capstone, but they're both doing it. And they're like 32-page books, and they do a good job of pitting a current athlete versus a former athlete. The one that we're going to be pushing this spring is Kevin Durant versus Larry Bird. I can tell you there's a clear, correct answer to that, but these are especially if you do book fairs, these are easy wins.
Yeah. I would like to talk about the romance part of it because we just came off of Valentine's Day and we did some really interesting things. We had big displays, but we actually centered a lot of our display on doing new young teen in addition to middle grade. And that was a big step. And one of the first things I did was actually go to the reps, and a few of them were really great. They actually made me lists of all of their young teen, new teen books. It's really hard for us to go back and do all of that. So I urge you all to continue to ask this for reps because then they put them on Edelweiss, and then they're doing all these other lists. So why can't you have a new teen, young teen list? I will say we also included books that included kids who were ACE. So that was a really important thing. And kids responded in such a great way to that we had AOK and some other books like that. That's a really important thing, that it's not, kids thinking in a completely different way and reacting to other people in a different way. That was a really beautiful thing. So I just think that's really, really important. And don't hesitate to ask your rep to actually do some work for you like that, because they will actually do it happily.
And if I can tag on to that a little bit, it's interesting. In this panel, we're talking about middle grade. One of the areas of concern we have, and talking to other kids' booksellers and a couple librarians as well, an area they share concerns with as well is kind of that age between 12 and 15. And we see a lot of drop off there. So I just want to mention these two librarians have really put together a lot of great info and are making a push for this is something we need to keep kids engaged, young teen. So I've got some information up here, especially for any booksellers, but any publishers that are in the room. If you want to learn more, I have this up here for you.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I just want to say one more thing, which is really important, because we've been talking about this for multiple institutes. If you've been to other institutes in the past, we've been begging publishers to do paperback debuts and simultaneous hardcover and paperbacks. And they listened. And the last 2 seasons, if you've been looking at those catalogs, you're getting all the paperback releases at $12.99 for new, great, new middle grade, new teen romance, YA, thrillers, and simultaneous, so that the librarians can get those books too. The only way you can keep that going is if you actually support those publishers who are doing it. You need to keep supporting them and buy and get some of those books.
Yeah.
So that,
and I would say same for like the hybrid books that are, not quite graphic, but not pure novels. We're seeing more of that, and that's something we've been asking for. So, and I think that's great for engaging the middle grade.
Dogman, like with illustrations mixed in with the...
Right, more like the Wimpy Kid format, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And publishers are listening. In the last couple of buying seasons, we've seen an uptick in middle grade romance books. Specifically, the one that I really enjoyed was Nashay Jones' Courtesy of Cupid. And there's a sequel that came out to that earlier this year. Lynn Painter, who's a very successful YA author, has a middle grade debut coming out. So the publishers are willing to listen and listen quicker than you would expect. So we just have to keep demanding the things that we think are going to engage our kids.
And as we're thinking about like meeting readers where they are currently, another thing that has come up in a number of institutes that I have been to as a bookseller, which was like, I just started doing this 2 seconds ago, but even as an author before, was this need for shorter books. We need shorter middle grade. We need middle grade that more effectively bridges the gap between early readers, chapter books. And we have seen more of that in the last season. Now, again, not nearly as much as we would like to see, but we are seeing incremental changes, which has been really helpful. And so thinking about shorter books that engage, art, illustrations inside of them, and not being stuck on the idea that just because a book is being marketed to a 12-year-old doesn't mean that the 12-year-old is actually the person who's going to be reading the book. Or just because a book is marketed towards an 8-year-old doesn't mean that a kid who's 10, 11, 12, who needs that as an entry point would not also be interested in that. So we don't have to be fixated on the marketing categories and the marketing distinctions. We need to just be engaged with the actual content itself and the customer, the reader, the kid themselves. To that end, let's talk about how we can do this in our stores, how we can lay this out, how we can sell these books. You know what? Take it away, Bren.
I've said I actually move a lot of the books you were talking about, some of the fiction that have illustrations in them. I moved Max in the Midnights is a great example. There's some of the longer early chapter books. I move into those sections. I created a subsection of graphic novels for earlier graphic novels that are really readers that really work. And that's really, really important. Yeah. I think there's something that's really important is that with these kids who are actually there, yes, there's kids that just don't want to read. There's a different thing. There's kids who are actually struggling at reading because of the crisis. And that's a whole other thing. And you are not going to give them leveled readers. They're not going to read leveled readers to be able to learn how to read. So we have to come up with really creative solutions in some of these early Cat and Cat Adventures. How many people have Cat and Cat Adventures? That is like an excellent example of that type of emerging reader graphic novel that is excellent and adorable. And so I would say get past where you shelf things and start to do things a little differently in the store.
I would say an example of that is I think a lot of folks would think of Princess in Black as more in the early reader, but we keep it in middle grade because if someone's graduating into middle grade, parents will come in and say, hey, I want my kid to be reading chapter books, but I want a soft introduction. We point them right to Princess in Black and they eat that up.
I don't know how many of y'all have been to Annabelle's book club in LA. But if you get the opportunity to stop by, it's adorable, but it's also a bookstore that's run by an actual young person. It was founded by a teenager. And so books in that store are shelved by vibe. Literally. It's like there's a section that's shocking. Well, books over there are going to shock you. There's a book over here that's swoon-worthy, and they're swoony. Is it all romance? No. Is it all thriller? No. But it's helpful, especially for young readers, to know I don't really care about genre. I couldn't even always tell you that I can. But, a young reader can't always tell you the difference between fiction and nonfiction. But you know what they can tell you? I know what it feels like to be alarmed or excited or shocked. And so I'm not saying everybody needs to shelve by vibe, but
it's a great idea for some great displays to pull out some of those books. That's an awesome idea.
And if you do not have your sports fiction pulled out of fiction in your actual sports section, you are losing out. They will sell off of the shelves if you take. And I mean, I'm not talking about I'm talking about real sports fiction. There's so much great, Mike Lupica, all of that. Move all of that over from early books to YA into the sports section. I guarantee you they will fly off the shelves. And that also goes for Alan Gratz. You can take Alan Gratz over into World War II. Kids who are looking for World War, those Alan Gratz books fly off for kids who love historical fiction.
All right. So one of the questions we want you all to be thinking about, and this is for those of us who are coming from bookstores that are not children specific, but do have children's sections, is how many people on staff can actually and enthusiastically talk about middle grade. It can't just be the people who are in this room. It has to be multiple people on staff, which means we need to, when we're in that galley room, actually, matter of fact, let me read y'all down a little bit. When I'm in that galley room, there should not still be so much middle grade and YA still left on the tables. That means we're not taking nearly enough and sending it back to our stores. And so if we have the opportunity to read these books ahead of time, and we don't even have to finish the book. I know y'all not finishing all the books anyway. We don't even have to finish the book, but you have to know enough to be able to talk about it and be able to pull out the nuances in those stories. So it can't just be us in this room. It has to be everybody on our team. We got to be engaged across genres. I know we all have our specialties, but something to think about is, am I the only person who can do this? If so, then we are not actively engaging our readership, or we are doing a disservice to our store.
Every one of my booksellers is on Edelweiss. I have every single one of my booksellers signed up on Edelweiss. They read, in downtime, they read the picture books. They put notes in Edelweiss so that the rep can read them and then I can read them. When I go do the buying, I know exactly what they want. I know exactly what they love. And I buy, really intelligently. And then middle grade, they can actually read it however they want to physically read it. They can actually read those books too. They should have complete access to Edelweiss. If you don't have them on there, that's the first step I would take.
Beautiful. Okay. So we've talked a bit about what's hot currently. One thing we need to be figuring out or thinking about always is that national trends don't always trickle down to all of our stores. I know that it is easy if we are talking about stores with a lot of square footage. It's easier if we're talking about coastal stores or big city stores. But if you're in a rural adjacent or rural community, I know that maybe Heartstopper is not moving as many copies on your shelves. I get it. I'm from Indiana. But to that end, figuring out what's not just what's happening nationally, but what's happening in your community that you can forecast that would be interesting moving forward. We're in Indianapolis, which is where Kaylin Clark is. So I know Kaylin Clark books are going to move in my store, but that may not be the case for you all. Maybe it's, I don't know. Well, I was going to say Sid Colson, but she's also coming to Indiana. So who knows? Wow. It's beautiful to be a lesbian. It's a great moment for me personally. But the point is, those things are regional and may not always hit every market is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. All right. So how can we make it easier to literally shop physically in the store? Well, there are a couple ways. First of all, we can cross-shelve graphic novels and manga, as Bryn especially has been talking about, but Paul has touched on too, is like, we don't have to keep things exactly in the box that the publisher tells us that we have to keep them in. Your store is your store. you know your customers, you know your readers, you know your audience better than anybody else does. And so figuring out creative solutions, creative ways to shelve those books, maybe even shelving them by vibe.
Yeah. We don't have Dogman. We do not put in our graphic novel section. We put Dogman back into the middle grade fiction, what we would consider our 8 to, and we put all the hardcovers in there. We mix our hardcovers and paperback because if I have a hardcover section, that's just like an exclusive section for kids who have access and money to be able to buy them. And also, if it's a series, they're not going to know to go over there to look for the new book that's inside the series. They need to all be in one place so that they can get them all at the same time. Just be I think you just be creative in how you actually shelve and
Creative and clear.
In clear, very clear.
Yeah.
And some of you all are coming from stores that are small, like mine. And so you don't have the luxury of having 100 different types of section. Your middle grade is just going to be in a middle grade section because you have one bookcase for it. And so if that's the case, we really have to figure out how we can leverage our specialty displays to highlight some of these titles that maybe are going under the radar or books that people would not necessarily think, oh, this is a middle grade novel.
You know, I was visiting London last year, and I love those. I love UK, period. I was in the UK bookstores. What I loved about them was, and they were all new bookstores, but they just had like stacks of books sitting around everywhere. There was shelved books, but then there was just like stacks of books here, stacks of books over there. And it was really great was seeing the kids go up and just start to explore through all of the different stacks that were actually, you know, they were designed a little bit interesting ways too. But
I love that.
You know, I think that's a good way of being able to do it in a small space too.
Yeah. Holly, did you have anything to add?
Well, you know, I'm just sitting here thinking a lot about, I mean, and we have to think about what are we doing in our stores. But I'm thinking the other part of the conversation is how are we connecting outside of our stores? And so I think that's an important piece for us to be thinking about too. And, you know, so we have a few opportunities to be, you know, working at schools, doing things at conferences that are geared towards kids. And so, you know, providing books and books that would be interesting and captivating to places where kids already are. So I think that's a good thing for us all to think about is where are more of those opportunities. We
take all of our galleries from the last year, and we take them out to all the local schools. We have partnerships with the local schools, and then those teachers give them out to all the students. All we ask the students to do is give us back a review. And we use those reviews on our website as well as inside the actual store. Yeah. Kids love peer reviews. That's what they want.
Yeah. If you have the opportunity to get young people reviewers, I know Blue Willow does this really well, like actually has a team of like teens who do the reviewing for YA middle grade. Love that. Leverage the young people. They love free labor. The kids yearn to work.
And free books.
All right. So looking forward, here's some things for you to think about. What are easy and sustainable actions you can make to increase interest, access, and discoverability? This is an individual question. We obviously cannot answer this for you in all your stores, but hopefully some of the things we've talked about today have given you some action steps for things you can take home to help highlight some of these different
or maybe books. Spurred some new ideas that then you can share with us.
Yeah, right. Bring it back to me personally. Don't email me though. Okay. So it is now time for the Q&A. You've been waiting. I've been seeing your eyes. You've been waiting. All right, Jen's going to run the mic to you. Wait until you get the mic before you start chatting though.
Hi, I'm up in Bend, Oregon, and we have Oregon Battle of the Books, which every year it's 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th. 9th through 12th doesn't do anything. But those 3rd through 8th, we sell thousands more books every year. Middle grade is in our top 3 of every year's sales.
Oh my God.
We also host an annual educator night where all year long, they get 10%. On that night, they get 20%. But we do book fairs. We do library orders. We have made the schools like such a big part of our bookstore that they keep coming back to us. The other thing that we do with Oregon Battle of the Books is every year when the new list comes out in April, I contact every single author from 3rd through 8th and ask them if they will do a 1-hour free Zoom with us. We open it up to the entire state of Oregon and the kids go crazy.
Could you explain really quickly to people what Battle of the Books is?
So basically, the kids have to read. So they form teams. It's 4 to 6 kids. They have to read all the books in their age group. And then they have trivia. And they have to beat another team. And it's competitive. And I've been there at the regionals where they are battling to go to the next round up to Portland to do state. And when they get knocked out, those kids are bawling. So we have the next year's books waiting on a table so mom and grandma and grandpa can come and make them feel better with new books.
Prey on them. Prey on their adolescent emotions. To that end, I do want to just add that, like, if you're in a state much like Indiana, where you have teachers who are being policed actively, who can't have the books in their classroom libraries that they would like to have, they have to report every title that they bring into their classroom library. Part of our job now is to indicate to those teachers that we are a support for them, that we are a resource to them. And so adding, that type of programming where we give them access to the store for a night and add a discount or whatever, any way that you can support teachers also supports your readers, also supports those young students. And that's ultimately all of our goal.
Even asking a publisher to send you extra galleys if they still have printed galleys, and using those as borrowable copies within your store for parents who want their kid, for kids to actually take out from your store and bring back.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from Parnassus in Nashville, Tennessee.
Woo!
Thank you.
Big fan.
So we've got a great children's section, but in Tennessee and Nashville, we are getting more and more parents who have increasingly strong thoughts about what their kids should read content-wise. And it really limits us in terms of title discoverability for kids, the ability to really ask those kids what they like to read and get a real answer. So how do y'all deal with that in your stores? And how do you make sure that the kids walking out actually have something that they genuinely want to read?
That is such a good question. And we were just talking before how, as kids booksellers, we not only have one customer, we usually have two. Mm-hmm. And so figuring out how to speak to both is challenging. And I mean, in our store, when the kid is there, we always focus the conversation on the kid, even if the adult with them is answering. We still will ask the questions to the kid as long as we don't get the feeling that they feel like they're being put on the spot. But I'd be curious to hear how other people manage that too.
I will say, I'm sure somebody else is going to answer this question. But I do want to add, this is not necessarily what you're saying, but this morning, Philomena had a session about content-based attacks on bookstores. And so there was the question about, like, how do we continue to keep the books on our shelves that are indicative or reflective of the store's values? And one of the answers is do not obey in advance. Do not take the books off the shelf. Do not take them from your face outs. Do not take them from your displays just because there are going to be parents who are going to come in there and are going to take issue with it. Yeah. That is the first step towards fascism. And we are on the front line of making sure that information remains accessible. So even when there is pushback, like, we have to keep those books out there. And we have to, to Holly's point, we have to keep asking the kids the question, what is the thing that you really want to read? And figuring out ways we can figure out your quiet covers, I think, is something that comes up a lot in my marketing meetings with my books, is like, how can we indicate to a kid that this book is gay, but to the parent that it's safe? So figuring out what those titles are and how you can, like, sell that to them, even if the parent is like, yeah, we want our kids to read. I don't even know what they're reading. I don't know. Everything in my store is cool, so I don't know.
There's another aspect of it too, which is because we're in a very safe environment. We still have a lot of people complain about different things, but that's not necessarily one of them. But we get tons of orders because we have a high internet presence. We get tons of orders from North Dakota, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. And what I do with those is I actually fulfill the order because I need the money. And then I actually, in the email response saying, thank you for your order, I actually go to the ABA list by state of all of the indie bookstores. And then I give them the contacts for the stores that are actually in their area and say, these stores will definitely have the books that you need. They will support you. It's really important because sometimes they don't even know that there are 3 bookstores in their state that will be able to do that. So for those of you who are in safe places and you're getting those orders from those places, I suggest we're brothers and sisters. We got to go and do that. We got to support everybody. So send them back to the right places.
Hi, Kelly Brown from Magic City Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we're a general bookstore and we have a smaller children's section. So I was and you kind of spoke a little bit about this with regards to like teachers requesting frontlist titles and maybe newer books versus but like backlist is also what's selling. So like, can you kind of speak a little bit to the kind of balance between making sure you have the appropriate backlist titles versus getting in new stuff that kids can discover? So
I have a little variation on that thing, which I think is really, really important because you're talking about teachers and librarians in particular that are sending kids in to get Little House on the Prairie, or they're sending them to get in. So what I do is I actually try to tag in things. So I'm going to talk to you. I have to have a conversation with the parent and you about Little House on the Prairie because that's a very complicated book. But I'm also going to give you Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park because that happens in the exact same town, the exact same setting, in the exact same environment. And it's a different take on that story that broadens the story in a different way. And if you're reading Peter Pan, then I'm going to give you Cynthia Letic Smith, Sisters of the Neversea. Or I'm going to give you, if you're reading The Wizard of Oz, for those of you who don't know, Frank Baum, I love Wicked and I love everything else. Frank Baum was the most virulently hateful person for indigenous people. He thought they should be decimated and destroyed off the face of the planet. And she did a beautiful, I think Hearts Undone, I think is the title of it, YA, that was related to that topic. So I think it's also just one more part of that, the middle grade, because we're going into that place. But think about these conversations you need to have about very complicated books you have on your shelves and giving them alternatives or books to read in conjunction with that. It's really, really important if we haven't learned from Ocean's talk and everything else about that.
Yeah. And I think, too, one way you could have a conversation around that, too, if they're kind of stuck on, these are the books we've had for years and we're going to keep having, make references to, what kind of reviews the new books are getting. This is doing really well here, or I've seen so many great reviews about this new book. So encouraging them to try something new and different in that way.
Yeah, and if there's a publisher that does a remixed classics series, if you're a fan of Little Women and you don't want to read about white girls anymore, recommend So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow. There are so many alternatives now that we have that a lot of times I think folks just haven't heard of yet because they don't necessarily get the marketing support.
And that's part of our job to say that, yes, sure, we have this and we also have this.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Both and.
Yeah.
We have a question back here. Hi, I'm Lily Engel from Bloomsbury Publishing. Thank you to all the indie booksellers. We love you. I have a question sort of in a similar vein about reaching parents as the audience for middle school books, and not in the sense that they might be trying to censor content that their kids are reading, but just that they're too busy maybe to read and to really know what a book is about before they give it to their kid. So do you have any suggestions of things that we as publishers can provide that will help, convey to parents that we think this book is really special for various reasons, things that would help with that audience?
So, one of the ways that we try to get middle grade books in front of parents is we host a lot of book fairs and we encourage the schools to have parent nights. So, if there's little standees that we can slide into a book when we bring it to a book fair, that kind of thing, that on a very basic level, like if you liked Hatchet, you'll like this adventure book. Those kinds of things help. But honestly, it's just making it clear to us. And whereas in an earlier session when they said, put graphics in Edelweiss, because if it's clear to us, then we can make it clear to the customers. Like Leah said, sometimes we don't even if you're really subtle about the fact that this is a Little Women remix, we might not notice. Hopefully we do because it's our job. But nobody bats 1,000. So if you make it clear to us, then we can make it clear to the adults.
I just want to add in, this is another thing, but I had talked before about like, how do you get kids to get excited about reading something different and think about that? Kids who love mythology and that's folk tales and fairy tale, those sort of thing. And because we have a rock star here, a legendary rock star, I want to talk about Grace back there. Grace Lynn is right there. And her collection of her Chinese cooking and all of the different folk tales that were related to that is an excellent example of being able to do that's middle grade reading right there. And that's a beautiful example of how to think outside the box for kids who cook. We all have kids who love cooking. That's an excellent, excellent book.
We have a question over here. Does anyone have any suggestions or examples of learning to read programming or partnerships that you guys have been doing or planning to sort of help assist the schools with their non-existent learning to read programs?
Mm-hmm. So you mean specifically at schools, or?
It doesn't have to be specifically at schools. I just know there was a lot of talk about the fact that phonics isn't being taught.
Right. Yeah. That's been a hot topic recently. There's nothing we specifically do with schools, but we have started thinking more about what do we have in the store that is both going to be like, because I feel like our job is to help kids discover the joy of reading. And the school's job is to teach the reading. But we are carrying more things that are more phonics focused. So we're just thinking about our collection a little bit differently in those ways. But the other thing we do is we connect with like early childhood centers and we'll go out to them and talk about early literacy and the foundations of reading. So I don't know what others you all have.
Well, we're starting to do workshops. So the hardest thing to do is to actually get people to come for a book launch. How do you do it? Like, you're trying to find ways to be able to do it. It's really, really difficult. So we've been asking the writers to actually do their book launch as a writing workshop, where they can actually talk to the kids about how to build a ground of fantasy structure or something. Kids show up in droves. And then they end up buying the author's book because the author's been using their book as the model. And that's a really excellent way of getting that sort of thing going on. You can work with teachers to be able to get their students. And the other thing is we actually have teachers who bring their students in for poetry slams. And that's another great way.
One thing we do at our store is we have a middle grade book club. And it's very lovingly hosted by a local author who lives in the area. And she not only lets the kids pick the books each month that they pick for book club, but they also talk about the kids a lot of the time are writers themselves. And so she gives them writing prompts. And, they're not necessarily like slavishly talking about the book. They're talking just about writing and reading in general. And, it's not super well attended, but it's something that we're constantly encouraging and hopefully it rubs off.
We only have 2 minutes left, so this is going to be your last question.
And unfortunately, it's not totally a question, but I can speak to what she was asking about and share some information. So my name is Melody, and I own Park Books and the Lit Collab. And what we do, I've been a reading specialist for 15 years. My store was built around my lab. And so I encourage anyone who has that sort of want or will to improve actual reading, like not just reading engagement, because I found that my readers are more engaged because we do have opportunities for them to grow as readers in the store. So I use our extra space, and I myself have now hired all my friends from grad school who are also reading specialists who come at night and teach small group reading to families who have the ability to do that. And in that, I've also been tasked and contracted with my local county school system, and because they know who I am, because for one, I quit. And I'm doing something that actually really helps them because so many kids did not get their compensatory service hours and things that they needed during COVID time period and with the slides and the things that have happened. And they found that it's easier for them to pay me a lot of money to pay their own teachers even more money at night and on weekends to teach the students within our system than it is for them to do it directly. So it's a really great opportunity if you're somebody struggling or looking for another stream of income, have the will, have the ability. I recommend it to everyone. And if you ever need information, feel free to reach out. I'm not afraid to share because I know there's not a lot of us doing that. And I've been doing it successfully for about 5 years now.
Awesome.
All right. So as we wrap this up, things to consider moving forward: meet your readers, meet young readers, meet families where they're at, figure out exciting and new and inventive ways to shelve your books. And if you all have any questions for any of us, here's our contact information. It's on the slides. It's in your app. And don't forget, I know y'all didn't forget, don't forget to rate this session in the app. Thank you so much.
And real quick in closing, I just want to say thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
The in between in the title is real. Middle grade is where kids go from being read to reading on their own. And we all play the long game. This is the number one section, the number one area where we can turn people into readers and thus customers for life. Yeah. So this is really the most important area in the store.
Yeah. And let's not forget that these are the books that they see as weapons.
Mm.
These are the books that are causing everything that's going on. Everything you do, you are all on the front list of this battle against fascism. We always are. We are again. We all come together. We do it together. Let's hear it for all of us.
Okay, and so I get the last word. Now do the survey. Thank you.
You're so.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!